Thank you. Yeah, so when we talk about the local content, I believe that is very critical. The local content, mainly when we talk about the transition. But something to keep in mind is that the risk remain very high. And I will approach maybe that challenge around the risk at two levels, at the macro level and at the micro level. So at the macro level, one of the major risks that we are facing in the continent is the currency risk. We've seen the depreciation of most African currency over the past 3 years. You take the example of Naira that went from $1 for 400 Naira to $1 for, I think, 1,600. This is four times. You take that was the same story for the Ghanaian CD, from 15, from 5 CD to $1 to 15 at the peak. Three times same thing in North Africa with the Egyptian pound. Yeah, that went from 15 up to 45. So the risk is there, and that is the currency risk. Even now, when you go on the side of the credit risk, over the last few years, 8 African countries have been downgraded, by the major credit rating, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, and Moody's, and this create a lot of pressure on the borrowing cost of those African countries, and that will also translate on the capacity or the ability of the businesses to be able to borrow at a good level. You take the market risk, which is also very high. More than 80% of the African countries depend on commodity export, and that makes them very vulnerable to the fluctuation of the commodity prices. So this is at the macro level. At the micro level, when we come down now to the private sector, to the SMEs, they constitute 90% of the private sector. The risk is even higher, mainly when we talk about the company involved in the climate transition, in the green economy. And that for many reasons. I think one of the reasons will be like the liquidity gap. Green projects tend to have a higher upfront cost. And the financial institution, they tend to select the companies that need a lower initial disbursement, which is like the choice between the OPEX and the CAPEX, higher OPEX, lower CAPEX, and vice versa. And that creates this kind of liquidity gap where the bank, they will tend to prefer those projects that have a lower upfront cost. The duration gap is also one of the challenges. The payback period is quite long. It's longer for the green project. We know over time we make benefit, in terms of energy saving, but the payback period can be quite long. And that mismatch between the resources of the banks and the duration of the green project is also a challenge. We have the collateral gap, mainly also for the green project. When they assess those projects, they look at the resale value of the equipment. And when you look at the secondary market in Africa for the equipment or for the green equipment, it's still not really kind of developed, because of the maintenance issue. We don't have like all the expertise, to make sure that we can maintain those green equipment. And the currency mismatch is a big one. It's a big one because most of the time, those companies, they purchase those equipment in hard currency, but their revenue is in local currency. How do you manage those type of risk, to be able now to take the full advantage of the LCPs? But the risk is really a challenge, and that remain high.